That's 1, 2, 1, 2. Sir. Got caught by the FBI. Piracy is not a crime. Times are free. It's not thievery. Dollar your head and their taxation is unfair. The IRS is keeping you for success. Taking your money, the Federal Reserve is a private organization that was selling.
Today's book review will be that of Abbie Hoffman's his book, Steal This Book. You might recognize that title. It may sound kind of familiar because if you're a fan of System of a Down, they have an album that kind of copies that energy called Steal This Album. It's where they kind of got the idea from. Abbie Hoffman's titular book, Steal This Book. And in an honest review, it's an interesting read. Mostly it's dated. A lot of the information in here is kind of out of date, and to be honest, I feel like most of it was probably out of date by the time the book was published. But we'll just go through most of it. I mean, it's not a bad read, honestly. It's pretty interesting. Most of it has to do with, kind of a general how to be poor 101, maybe, I guess you could say. How to live poor, kind of learning, if you can find community living, roommates, hitchhiking, finding cheap food, how to find cheap food. The book kind of begins with, the first kind of section of the book begins with food, how to find free food. Some of it's just as simple as like 5-finger discount, it's like, okay, we needed a book for that, all right, fine. And others of it's just dine and dash. It's kind of like, all right, it doesn't seem like something too, revolutionary in practice. But it does have some recipes in here for that still apply today. Some of the food recipes, I mean, it's pretty, if you want to survive, it's survival food, that's for sure. It is not tasty, lacking pretty much in all flavor. Pretty much. I mean, it's pretty rough. It is how to be poor, for sure. It's called Cheap Chow, the section, for a reason. You'll get by, but I mean, as somebody who has lived poor and has lived on very cheap food, it gets old. It gets old fast. Ramen noodles get to be, you can't even eat them anymore after, so many months of living off ramen. But I mean, the book altogether, it's not a bad read. I kind of recommend it to some extent. Most of it has to do with revolutionary stuff, kind of, I guess, hippie movement and what would you say? Maybe socialist leaning. Just some of the sections we'll just go through. Table of contents: free food, free clothing and furniture, which basically is finding stuff on the street, Salvation Army, etc. Free transportation, hitchhiking, free land, housing, free education, free medical care. Most of it's just how to find free stuff, and it's really not very, I mean, it probably worked back then, but it's not going to work now. I mean, checking into a medical center with no ID, probably not recommended. Checking into an ER with no ID and a sob story, it might work, but that's a pretty corny method. I feel like there's probably some government program you could get on that would get you far more for what it's worth. And that's what I mean. The book is pretty dated. It's not. It's definitely in its time period. And it goes into various other subjects like communication, which is kind of a funny. I mean, at the time, I mean, some of this stuff works, but other, like some of the communication about like free radio was just basically like walkie-talkie, or CB radio. It's like, okay, it's not that revolutionary even for its day. It's talking about how you can have free radio in like, mostly in like an urban area, but it's just basically CB walkie-talkie. Like, okay, that was kind of done. There's a lot of stuff in here that it's kind of pawned off as revolutionary, but even for its day, really wasn't revolutionary. And some other just interesting stuff. And like in modern day with Twitter and the internet, communication is changed a lot. So that's kind of dated. And some other dated things like welfare and unemployment like still exist, but like it's a lot harder to get on welfare. And you don't just walk into a welfare office with a sob story. And unemployment, you actually will have to be unemployed. And, there's just how to get free money. And basically, I feel like the only thing that applies in this section is just good old-fashioned panhandling, really. He does have an interesting section in currency exchange, which, like, even back then, I highly doubt it was even worth the effort. Like, it was a lot of effort. Like, going to a bank and exchanging American quarters for Canadian quarters, and you would get more quarters for your money. But, like, the amount of effort, even back then, I can't imagine would even be worth. And when you get caught with a Canadian quarter, like, I'm sure any Americans in the audience, anytime you get, shortchanged, and you get a Canadian quarter at like a convenience store or something like that. I mean, it is the worst feeling, when you're counting your change up and then you realize they gave you like, a Canadian quarter of all things. It really sucks. You get, change back and you get 3 Washingtons and Queen Elizabeth. It's like, wait a second, man, you dirty crook. You knew that was Canadian. You gave it to me. You know what I mean? Anyway, I digress. So that was interesting. Maybe back then it was worth it. I don't know. I find that really, like, and it was back in the time when you had a lot more, like, vending machines. You had vending machines for drinks. You had vending machines for cigarettes. You have vending machines like Automat for, like, food vending machines at Automats. They probably still have Automats, but I have no idea. Not where I'm from, they don't. One of the things to discuss in this is media, like old school style print media, which, in my opinion, doesn't really date, especially like in an artsy-fartsy way, making old school zines and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't really date, but it was just, about leaflets and posters you can put around the city. I mean, that stuff doesn't really date, and it tells you how to acquire the paper and ink and doing stencils, paper stencils, mimeograph machine, which, I mean, I feel like there's better technology for that, but I mean, I don't know, maybe you could probably find one on eBay for cheap, and it would be pretty easy to run multiple like zines, and you might be able to, I mean, in modern day you might be able to find on eBay like a really cheap like Xerox. I don't know if you could probably find the cartridges for that. It's not the ink cartridge. I digress because I can't even think about what it uses. It's been so long since I've used a Xerox. Somebody will know and find out I'm an idiot. But anyway, duplicators, electronic stencils, some of this stuff. Silk screening, that would be for like, it's not bad. You can do posters in silk screening. You can do shirts in silk screening. I mean, from making underground zines and stuff like that, it's not bad. I don't really consider that dated. I find that stuff cool, especially if you still come across zines that are still being made. I mean, it's cool. I respect it. More on the revolutionary side, we have like makeshift riot squad protections, helmets, shields, etc. Still being used today. Old school stuff. Doesn't really age if you're out there protesting. Riot squad shows up. Get yourself some. I mean, honestly, just a bicycle helmet would suffice for the most part. A good solid bicycle helmet and just some makeshift armor. For rubber bullets. I mean, it's still gonna hurt, but you may not break a rib or something like that, or makeshift trash can shield, stuff like that. most of the makeshift, I will say the weird side of this book is it does just straight up have like weapons in it, just like straight up how to acquire guns and weapons and ammunition, which is kind of like, well, we've definitely gone revolutionary. It kind of left the flower power side of this book, and we're kind of straight on Che Guevara level revolutionary. And most of the makeshift weapons in here, sterno can bombs and stuff like that, are like anarchist cookbook level memes, which I'll probably do a book review for anarchist cookbook. It's pretty useless. The only like real weapon that you can actually hurt people with, kill people with, is like the pipe bomb. That's a no joke weapon. You don't want to be playing around with that. Don't endorse making pipe bombs, even for the fun of it. Like, you're gonna kill yourself. That's a grenade. There's no other. It's a grenade. It's just straight up a grenade. You don't want to mess around with that stuff. I might have a past. Who knows? I plead the fifth. But the end of this book, basically, continues with how to find free housing, which most of it's communes. I don't even know if communes exist today. There might be some communes that still exist in like the Pacific Northwest and stuff like that. Wouldn't be surprised. But for most of, United States, I don't know of any communes that exist. And most of the other like locations are just basic homeless rehab shelter type stuff that you can find. Most of these locations probably don't exist anymore. I didn't do my research because I don't really care that much. It's just a book review. I don't really care to do all the research to see if any of this actually still exists. But some locations probably do exist. Highly doubt, but there are probably some that still exist. Stuff like, Salvation Army or homeless shelter or something like that. Probably still exist. Overall, the book, it's a pretty interesting read. To the mindset of like cheap living with like a revolutionary twist, and then it kind of digresses into like violent revolutionary twist, which I don't know, most of the info is highly dated. Most of the violent stuff is useless except for a couple examples. Interestingly enough, about this book, I found out that Abbie Hoffman, the writer of this book, was criticized for publishing all the tricks of the trade to everybody from this book. Like, it's no longer like a trick anymore now. It's no longer a life hack, right? This is life hack before life hack. It's no longer a life hack anymore. Now it's out to the public, and is kind of highly criticized for this. And because now everybody knows. Seems like a pretty valid concern, but honestly, truth be told, like, life hacks only last for so long. They're not lifelong. You don't have lifelong life hacks. Like, people find out, and if it's a hack, it gets patched or whatever the case may be. It doesn't last very long, and especially in the age of the internet. That stuff's over, man. You can forget about your sob story and whatever. The internet finds all that stuff, and the powers that be patch that stuff up. It's kind of no longer a thing. Anyway, I don't know. What would I give this book? 5 out of 10, maybe? Interesting read. Wouldn't read again. That's about it. If you're interested, I say give it a read. If you like stuff like Anarchist Cookbook and the like, or you're a System of a Down fan, I don't know, who cares? Give it a read, see what you think. But for the most part, it's pretty mid, pretty dated. I feel like it was dated even back then, but hey, it's whatever. That's about it. Thanks for coming on to the show. Hope to see you next time.
Download the Internet was brought to you by the Advocacy for Pirates Institute, the Read a Book You Dummy Foundation, and from retards like you. Screw you.